today's webinar. We will be covering 8 tips for CISOs before the next board meeting. I am Jordan Ackerman. I am a change management consultant here at Ascent. Today, we will be having Elliot Parks, the Managing Director of Advisory Services, presenting. Elliot has an extensive background in cybersecurity consulting, both in the private and public sector. He's also done a number of years for government intelligence. And so all of that informs the expertise that he's bringing to the conversation today. Elliot, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Jordan. Appreciate it. And welcome, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from. We sincerely appreciate having you with us today to talk through some tips for Chief Information Security Officers prior to your next board or executive meeting. So really what we want to talk about today is just that, is just some key themes to keep in the top of your mind as you're preparing for that next important conversation. We understand when we're advising clients how stressful the preparation can be prior to these types of discussions where you're giving updates on the state of the program. Maybe it's requesting for additional resources or funding. Maybe it's communicating risk in a way that's approachable. And so what we've done is we've really broken it down to what we think are 8 important tips to keep in the top of your mind as you're preparing for these discussions. And we'll get into each of these that you see on the screen as we move forward in the presentation today. So the first one that we wanted to start with is to care about what your executives care about. It may sound simple, it may sound pretty elementary, but it's important to remember the mission and the objectives of your organization, as well as the board of directors or executive committee that you're going to be briefing. Typically, the executive committee or the board of directors is responsible for oversight and governance of the organization. So keeping that in mind and making sure that your communication and the information that you're providing to them aligns with that mission and objectives and supports their ability to do that. Additionally, you're going to want to be looking out for shareholder interests. So whether that's interest in some sort of growth metric, revenue, return on investment, but the investors may have a slightly different set of interests and goals, and keeping those in mind as well. And finally, communicating compliance and regulatory risk to this group of leaders in relevant terms. So understanding the regulatory requirements and the environment that your business or organization is operating in is critical. We all know that fines and penalties of non-compliance can be significant, and oversight and scrutiny on cybersecurity compliance is only getting more intrusive, and more oversight is coming. So, when you think about caring about what your executives are caring about, we really encourage the clients that we work with to evidence a deep understanding of what everyone in the room or on the call is concerned about, and evaluating those concerns and speaking to them through the lens of some of the initiatives and the hard work that you and your teams are doing. As we think about and move forward in this presentation, what I'll try to do is bring up maybe some hypothetical examples of an organization or a particular member of an executive committee, and how this tip may relate to this particular person or this particular organization. So from beginning here, we may think of a hypothetical retail organization, and what some of those concerns might be for the board or for the investors. Certainly consumer spending habits, understanding some of the macroeconomic conditions that we're facing right now. How are those impacting the growth or the success of the business, and what are some of the ways that the information security or cybersecurity initiatives are supporting continued growth, continued achievement of those business objectives, and what the executive committee and the investors may be concerned about. Additionally, if this hypothetical retail organization is operating in areas that have additional regulatory requirements, maybe they have offices or they're dealing with customers in California or the EU, those additional regulatory requirements are going to come into place in terms of customer information privacy requirements. So making sure that you're aware of, you're keeping those top of mind, and that you're communicating the hard work that you're doing to ensure that the business is staying on the right side of those requirements. So the second tip that we like to offer up to CISOs prior to the next board meeting is to remember that you and your board are on the same team. We understand, again, the heightened pressure that these interactions can often create. And unfortunately, there are times when the relationships between the information security leadership and maybe the executive committee or the board of directors can become antagonistic. A lot of times there's a lot of pressure and scrutiny. What are we doing to manage cybersecurity risk? Are we secure? What about that breach that happened to company XYZ? Could that happen to us? These questions can often be rapid fire, and there's a lot of pressure behind them. So what we try to encourage our clients to remember is that we're all serving the same purpose. We're all here to further the objectives of the organization. That my goals contribute to achieving your goals. And if we think about the people that are arrayed around the board table, the board room, or the executive committee, your CEO is certainly considering all of the varied interests of the folks around the room. So how are you speaking to the concerns that your CEO has? How are you evidencing that the information security team is aligned with the organization's goals and that you're moving in a direction to support those? How are you providing support to the operations and different business functions that are around your organization? You're going to want to think about the way that you communicate successes of your own successes of the cybersecurity organization and relate those to overall successes of the business. In the industry, we always say security is a team sport, and we view this tip as a good reminder that you and the executives that you're briefing are on the same team. Everyone is trying to row in the same direction. And the other side of that coin is that they're on your team. And so trying to build advocacy, strengthen relationships between your team and the executives. And we'll talk a little bit more later in the presentation about ways to do that. But it's important that you're also communicating what you're requesting from them, the support that you need, justifying it, of course, and aligning it to overall business objectives. But it's a two-way street. The relationship that you're trying to develop with the executives has to be give and take. You're providing, assurance of security and compliance. Your teams are working super hard to protect the information and the assets of the organization, and in return, you're inviting partnership and support from the executives that you're going to be briefing. And so the third tip that we wanted to talk about today is a reminder that cybersecurity risk is enterprise risk. And we understand that the leaders that have been around the industry, we're seeing this conversation happen more and more. We're seeing more organizations elevating cybersecurity risk to the level of other enterprise risks, whether that's CISA putting out guidance, specifically recommending and advising organizations and government agencies to elevate cybersecurity risk and speak about it in the same way, the same vocabulary, giving it the same airtime as credit, financial, operational, reputational risk. Cybersecurity risk is pervasive, and the result of cybersecurity incidents can ripple through entire organizations the same way that other enterprise risks have the potential to do. So we encourage you, as you're preparing to deliver this information, to have these discussions, to remember and to constantly reinforce and support the idea that cybersecurity risk deserves to be spoken about in the same way. It's really important for organizations to understand it, to talk about it, and to address it appropriately. Additionally, as you think about your organization within the firm, the cybersecurity team, what we like to see them positioned as an enabling function. and a hedge against that risk that is so important. The cybersecurity team is there to make the organization better, is there to make the organization operate more securely, and always in line with the overall business objectives of the firm. If we think about maybe some recent initiatives that your organization has undertaken. So an example might be, again, if we take a large retail organization, hypothetically, the security team has just gone through a major identity and access management transformation. It was a huge lift. It required a lot of support from a lot of different organizations, a lot of time. But the ultimate thing that's important to communicate is, how is that making the organization not only safer, more secure, but how is it enabling people to do their jobs better and more efficiently? So maybe the outcomes and the things to communicate there are, user identity lifecycle management is streamlined. So that's a bunch of buzzwords in the security organization. Other folks on the businesses might tune out at that. But basically what we're trying to say is, it's easier for you to get people up and running. We can create identities, we can create accounts for folks. We can increase or decrease the time from bringing someone on the team to getting them up and running. On the backside, the deprovisioning process, again, because of the hard work that the security team did, along with our other partners across the business, we're able to make sure that folks that need to be deprovisioned, where their access needs to be curtailed, it's done so efficiently. Maybe it's automated. So again, you're reducing the overhead and the time required from other folks around the organization. And oh, by the way, there's a major security benefit that we'd like to talk to you about as well. So again, thinking about how we're communicating to executives as well as across the organization, a foot stomp moment is that cybersecurity risk is enterprise risk. And here are some of the ways that the cybersecurity team, that the information security team, are enabling the business to operate more efficiently and in a more secure manner. The fourth tip that we would encourage folks to remember is that no business, app, or system is 100% secure. So targeting maybe your chief operating officer, if we think about who might be arrayed around literally the board table or in your executive audience, hopefully your chief operating officer understands this risk. There is no such thing as a completely secure system. There is always going to be some level of risk inherent in this network device or a particular system or application. So how are we communicating the inherent risks and the risk that remains even after we've put in place all of the controls and all the steps that our team has been hard at work at to secure the organization? Thinking about what your COO is concerned about, and how are we relating the actions that we're taking as a team to speak to those individual concerns. So whether that's supply chain continuity, operating as efficiently as possible, risk reduction and mitigation. Again, important to remember and highlight the things that you and your team are doing to ensure that the supply chain risk is mitigated. So how are we thinking about third-party vendor risk management, risk audits? When we decide as an organization to partner with a third party or a supplier, what are the steps that we are taking as the information security team to get out in front of potential risk and limit the exposure that we have through our relationship with this potential partner? Again, considering the audience, your chief operating officer is going to be extremely concerned about how are we securing those relationships? How are we ensuring efficient and continual operation of the business, whether that's through relationships with partners, and again, some of those risk mitigation steps that we're taking. Additionally, thinking outside of or within the COO's purview, what are the ways that the information security team is enabling other shared services? So, the teams that are keeping the trains running on time, HR, people management, contracts, purchasing. How are the initiatives of the information security team enabling them, supporting them in what they do, and that you are communicating, that you understand the way the business functions, what those other constituents may need, and you're delivering on that. So another example of something to communicate here is the results of a crown jewels assessment. Again, we think about the information security team starting with what are the most important pieces of this business that we cannot afford to let fail. We understand what they are. We've conducted the analysis, and here's the resulting risk that's still that is still present, and what are we doing to mitigate that and to control for it. So evidencing the results of analysis and initiatives like that is incredibly important and can be super impactful to the different members of your executive committee or your board of directors. So the fifth tip that we want to talk about here is the fact that cyber risk reduction lowers total cost of ownership. We understand that in the cybersecurity industry, a lot of technology is extremely attractive at different points. It can seem as a simple solution to a complex problem. We'll throw money at the problem. We will find the best and newest tool, and that can be extremely expensive. Cyber risk reduction is going to lower your total cost of ownership of those tools of your entire program. You're justifying your expense with real reduction in risk. And the people who around the table whose ears might perk up at this line of discussion are probably your finance team. So your CFO is evaluating and receiving a lot of requests for additional funding. Maybe it's from the manufacturing side of the house. Maybe it's from sales. Maybe it's from a particular business unit. They are receiving requests for budget, requests for investment, and the information security team is no different. You're going to be putting together your budget, putting it in front of the executive committee, and trying to justify that spend. So communicating the ways that your cyber security initiatives, that your risk reduction is going to lower the total cost of ownership of this particular tool, solution, program, initiative, whatever it is, whatever you are asking for in order to protect the business, communicating that in a way that evidences risk reduction is really going to, we recommend as a way to communicate effectively and gain the support and attention of your finance team. Additionally, what we like to counsel is that modernization is a security imperative. So helping the executive committee and the folks that are going to be approving budgets to understand that outdated and legacy software systems present real and material risk to the organization. It's a security imperative that the team pushes forward with modernization efforts. There are always, compensating controls that we can put in place to account for some of that legacy architecture infrastructure. But we really recommend, as I'm sure everyone on this call understands, is leaning forward and pushing that modernization effort. And ultimately, what we're trying to communicate to the CFO or the finance team or the folks that are concerned with the investment as a part of this executive committee is, how are we maximizing that allocated budget? So everyone is going to be dealing with probably less than what they want, less than what they've asked for. And in the past, you and your team have probably had to deal with that as well. So what have you done with the resources that you've been given in order to support the business and ensure that the operations are continuing in a secure way? Revenue security, a huge concern of the finance team. And again, it gets back to your support of the operations of the business. Evidencing that you understand how the business makes money and what your initiatives are doing in order to secure that and to make sure that the forecasts can be made confidently, that we're not having to anticipate or hold our breath for a major security incident that's going to derail that forecasted revenue model. And the last sub-bullet here around data hygiene. Again, thinking from the perspective of your finance team, they are reliant on clean and accurate data in order to contribute to the business, to make those forecasts, to build budgets, to make accurate reporting, whether that's internal or potentially externally. The security team has a crucial role in that. Again, it comes back to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. you're a partner to the finance team, and it's important to communicate that to them, the vital role that you and your team, the hard work that you're doing in order to secure the information. A lot of times it can feel, um, I would say, a bit mundane if we're talking about data loss prevention programs and strategy. Why is that important? Beyond the technical discussion, there's a real impactful conversation to be had around the information that we're protecting with this program, with all of the hours and the resources that the information security is spending, has a direct effect on the finance team's ability to control information, report accurate information, and to answer the executive committee's questions in an accurate and timely way. To me, I think about this as just another lens to put on the interconnections that the information security team has throughout the business. But there is a specific conversation to be had with your finance team, with your finance directors and executives around the ways that you can reduce risk and lower total cost of ownership of a lot of the investments that you're requesting and hopefully receiving. So the sixth tip that we'd like to get into here is around communicating outcomes. And if we think again about the folks sitting around your board table, maybe there's a chief people officer, maybe there's an HR lead or director that you're communicating with. And we think that this is an opportunity really to land an important message with them around how your cybersecurity initiatives, how your information security initiatives are increasing productivity and performance. Again, a bit like we talked about earlier, so that the cybersecurity controls are not seen as simply impediments or additional friction. How are you enabling your teams to operate more securely, but also more efficiently? And here we like to think a lot about the awareness, cybersecurity awareness and training programs and platforms and different initiatives that our clients are putting forward. Survey after survey are coming out, and indicating that cybersecurity awareness training maybe doesn't always hit the mark. An annual e-learning module with a quick 5-minute quiz at the end of it maybe satisfies a compliance requirement. Yes, technically I am performing and I am requiring cybersecurity awareness and training of all my employees. How effective is that in actually impacting change and delivering outcomes, measurable reduction in risk? It's a really wicked problem because it deals with the human terrain, right? And if we think about cyber attack surface across an organization, people are often the most vulnerable facet of that. The majority of incidents begin with some sort of human action, either that's unintentional, accidental, insider threat-based risk, or malicious intent targeting individuals through phishing, spear phishing campaigns, things of that nature. So trying to communicate outcomes to HR directors, people managers, about how you are protecting the organization from a people first perspective. What we like to counsel our clients is that the training and awareness programs that you're putting forward should be relevant, interactive, and continuous. So relevant meaning speaking to the particular threats of your industry or your organization. Not all organizations are the same. They don't operate in the same threat environment or face the same risks. So does it make sense for this hypothetical retailer to be talking about nation state sponsored targeted espionage and phishing attacks? Maybe, depends on what they're selling. But perhaps that use case and that type of awareness and training would be more relevant for an organization operating in the national security space. So relevancy is incredibly important when we think about awareness and training for the people within our organization. Interactive, again, less of a passive sit in front of a whiteboard or a computer screen. How can we engage the audience? How can we create scenarios and situations where they're involved, engaged, and in less of a passive and just receive mode? And then continuous. Again, the compliance requirement may be on an annual basis that firms and organizations are required to deliver awareness and training. that is what it says in black and white. We can do that. Or, we roll out a campaign every cybersecurity awareness month, and then we kind of, wipe our hands of it and say, okay, next year. We strongly recommend that it is a more of a continuous basis. You want to have more interactions with the folks in your organization. Um, you know, Simulated phishing attacks, I think most organizations are engaged in that. That can be one way of continuous interaction, continuous touch points with the folks in the organization, but some way of getting in front of a broad audience, reiterating the importance of secure practices, and providing some tools for for your colleagues to operate in a secure fashion. So ultimately, when we're thinking about communicating outcomes, it's important to consider the ways that the actions, the initiatives, and the projects that your teams are carrying forward are actually um, impacting the way people are behaving, and changing the way that they interact with the data, with others, in order to allow you to operate securely. So the seventh tip, and this is one that I think is particularly interesting. We've been doing a lot of discussions and sort of um, we've been having a lot of good discussions internally here at Ascent about the way that cybersecurity incidents relate to business reputation. Um, and we feel that this tip really lands with marketing departments, communication departments. So again, the folks sitting around the executive roundtable or the board meeting, they're concerned. They have various concerns. Your marketing and your communications team are concerned, absolutely, with brand reputation. How are we seen in the public? Are we a trustworthy brand? Do people want to do business with us, or do they look at us as, I'm going to pass? I think company B is perhaps the way to go. How do we protect what is arguably one of our most valuable assets? That's our reputation. Um, Cybersecurity breaches absolutely have an impact in the way that the public perceives and trusts an organization. So you, as the individual responsible for securing the organization, or at least contributing in a major way to the security of the organization, you have a conversation to have with your chief marketing or your chief communications officer about the ways that the information security practices are protecting brand, and talking through instances in the news or hypothetical scenarios about how a breach could potentially impact the brand and the reputation and the trustworthiness of your organization. So employee satisfaction is another component of internal reputation management. And again, the information security team has a role to play here, and that's through insider threat management and potentially an insider threat program. Um, so are there ways that you and your team are managing that the risk of insider threat? Do you have ways of elevating potentially risky insider threat behavior? How can we communicate that to our HR department, to our marketing and communications department, to ensure that everyone is aware, again, that we're supporting brand management both internally and externally? The onboarding and offboarding processes, we talked a little bit about that earlier in a hypothetical scenario about a major identity and access management program that this retailer had gone through. Again, not only streamlining and making that process more efficient, but there is a security component there as well, a significant one, and that is ensuring that the right people have the right access when they need it, and when they don't no longer need it, they no longer have access. It's a quicker turnaround. And the last sub bullet on this slide is something, again, I think that we've been having some really interesting conversations internally about the ways that misinformation, disinformation, and malign information are impacting corporations and having serious impacts on the bottom line. In a previous life, working in the U.S. military, we talked a lot about information warfare and the ways that combatant countries will obviously use propaganda and information as a means of combat. we are seeing now that some of the same situations are present in the private sector. Cyber and cybersecurity incidents play into that misinformation, disinformation, malign information offenses a lot of times. Some of the examples that we've thought about are Wayfair and other organizations that have been caught up in virally spreading misinformation or disinformation campaigns, and how those have had a negative impact on public perception and ultimately customer engagement and potentially the bottom line. Another example, more recent in the news, is Dominion Voting Systems. This is an organization that has been combating and battling a lot of public perception and information warfare taking place in the public sphere. There is a cybersecurity component to that, and how are the information security teams positioning themselves to be ready for that, to identify that, and working within your organization. Perhaps it's with your crisis communications team, with your marketing team, partnering with them to say, you know what, we're keeping an eye on something that we see kind of happening. Maybe that's in your cyber threat intelligence capability. You're seeing something develop, and you have those relationships already built with partner organizations within the company, just to pass the information, say, we're seeing this. If we think it gets to a critical level, we're going to bring you in, and we have a playbook. We've already thought about how we're going to respond to keep the company on the rails, and to make sure that we're protecting the best interests of the firm. And the last tip that we wanted to talk about today really is around the ways that you can get on your executives' to-do list. So get more face time with the folks that may be involved in the executive committee or your board of directors. Obviously, everyone involved in this process is extremely busy, tons of competing demands, and maybe you only have a quarterly board meeting where maybe you're invited to present for 15 minutes on the information security, some updates on key initiatives, a couple metrics that you throw up on a slide, and that's it. That certainly happens. What we encourage the clients that we're working with is to think creatively about how to get more face time, to elevate the conversation. It is sort of an internal branding exercise. So the tips that we've talked about previously hopefully give some opportunities to show the ways that the cybersecurity team is integrated and partnering with and enabling other parts of your organization and your firm. So how can you bring those to light? How can you create other opportunities to communicate the value of the security organization? One of the ways that we've counseled is to recommend or to offer a cybersecurity risk focused working group or discussion group, maybe as a subcommittee of the board. Again, a lot of this is going to depend on the size of the organization, the complexity of your board kind of bylaws and what they're focused on. But we have worked with customers where they have developed, working groups or subcommittees that are specifically focused on cybersecurity risk as a significant point of discussion. An opportunity to have maybe a bit of a longer conversation with board members to not only educate them of what you're doing, what your team is doing, the hard work that you're putting in, but also soliciting for information. What are their concerns? What are the questions that they have? Not everybody on the board of directors or the executive committee is going to be a cybersecurity expert. It's important to gauge kind of their level of understanding and to bring them into the conversation in a way that's meaningful. Another method that we often recommend is to invite board members, maybe the entire committee or maybe a few, to observe an exercise. Maybe it's a tabletop or a simulation or some other form of exercise that you and your team are going through. This can be a bit anxiety producing, right? It's inviting additional eyes to kind of see how the sausage is made. But our advice is it's important to trust your teams, to trust the processes that you all have developed, and in the hard work that we know that all the security teams are engaged in. Invite the folks in to observe it. give them a better understanding of the complexity of the need for additional resources, whether that's headcount, training, technology. Um, it it offers a way to open the conversation and to just inform and educate, as well as start the dialogue in a different fashion, rather than you yourself standing up there and just briefing off a slide of what's happened in the last quarter. Um, Another option might be to invite one of your next level leaders to give part of the presentation. We think this accomplishes a couple things. One, gives a different perspective. Two, evidences trust in your team and kind of that leadership aspect. Here at Ascent, we really pride ourselves on focusing on people before process, before technology. And we work with clients across industry on developing their internal talent. So as you're doing that, as you're bringing up that next generation of security leaders, giving them the opportunity to actually evidence what they're doing, brief to these executive committees about what's happening, and again, the hard work and initiatives that they're undertaking. So that was the last of the tips that we invite the folks in security leadership to consider before your next board meeting. Hopefully it kind of went around the table and gave at least some thought provocation to how you might engage with different parts of your executive committee, individuals leading different departments, the ways that you can draw connections and evidence the value of the cybersecurity organization in supporting each one of those particular roles. The last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was just an opportunity that we'd like to call the security outcome sprint. It's a series of discussions that we do with customers and clients, again, across industry. And really what it's meant to focus on is preparing you to have kind of those outcome-based discussions with leaders, with your executive committee, as you think back about the priorities or initiatives that you and your team are focused on. So it's really built around a series of conversations, thinking about the initiatives that you and the team have been working on. What are some of the priorities, and how can we accurately and appropriately prioritize those and evidence outcomes to facilitate that next round of conversations, to evidence the hard work and the value that the team is doing, and how that aligns with sort of the roadmap and the initiatives and priorities that we have established or that you have established internally. So again, it's a great opportunity to have more of a detailed conversation about what you have been working on, how it aligns with priorities for the organization, and communicating those outcomes as you look forward to the next level or the next round of executive conversations. So with that, I'll pause, and maybe Jordan can come back on and see if we had any questions. Happy to answer those if any of them have come in.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions or thoughts they would like to share, feel free to add those to the Q&A or to the chat. Either works. All right, our first question is, how do you recommend a CISO pitch to execs who aren't or won't be available?
It's a great question, and not super unexpected. Again, we understand that the executive committee, the board of directors, have probably an endless list of competing demands, and I don't think there's really an easy way to line up calendars across each one of those individuals. But I think, kind of like what we talked about, it's about getting creative and inviting maybe additional opportunities for interaction, additional opportunities for discussion with the members of the executive committee or the board.
What is the first thing that you would recommend a new CISO start with after joining or being promoted?
A high five, congratulations, and then probably trying to establish a current state, a baseline understanding of the organization, and then thinking critically about your own priorities, stepping into the role as a leader, and how they may align or be or need some adjustment with the overall objectives of the organization. I think hopefully everybody on this call, and I know certainly here at Ascent, we think a lot about how cybersecurity is an enabling function. It has to be and has to serve the business. So starting from a position of business enablement and alignment with business objectives, I think those would probably be the ways I would consider it.
Awesome. This is a good one. Tips for working at an organization that's been burned by IT initiatives in the past.
Right. Well, I think in our role as consultants and advisors, I think we walk into situations like that a lot, where an organization or a company has maybe not gotten the value from a particular initiative or an IT project in the past, and they're hoping to avoid that in the future. And a lot of times that can lead to frustration internally. Again, the cybersecurity or the information security team can be seen as not the good guys or gals. And so I think some of the recommendations I would have would just encourage partnership, identifying how you can further the goals of the other partnering organizations. How can you be a good teammate? How can we translate this particular initiative or what we're trying to do now into positive business outcomes for them? I think I've gotten a lot of mileage out of that.
Yeah, and I know I specifically sit on the change management team, and so we are constantly working with organizations who have tried and maybe failed at implementing different IT initiatives, and we work with their senior leadership to rebuild that trust across the organization. Next question, what's a good way to show executives the impact of security initiatives for the business?
That's I think the $1 million question. And I think a lot of it is going to depend on the particular business and your particular situation. But again, getting back to what are the business objectives? Is it strictly revenue targets? Is it customer acquisition targets? Is it what are the metrics that the business ultimately cares about? How can you tie your security initiatives to those? How can you identify specific ways that you are driving down risk by the hard work that the team is doing? Again, not to give a consulting answer of it depends, but a lot of it is going to depend primarily on the objectives of the business and how can you align what you're doing to serving those ends. Sincerely want to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. We always appreciate the opportunity to share some of the ways that we're thinking about cybersecurity and the way that we can support our customers and partners. If you have any additional questions, please reach out to the folks that invited you or come directly to us. Happy to have additional conversations and welcome the opportunity. So thank you again and have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.